Welcome to Second Take, the show that focuses on the issues behind the news. The Cameroon, Congo, Gabon region on the African continent is often likened to Australia's iron ore-rich Pilbara, but needs a champion to assemble various players to make an impact. Mining Weekly editor Martin Creamer tells us more. Welcome, Martin.
Thanks, Shannon.
Now, how can the Cameroon, Congo, Gabon region become a serious competitor to Australia's Pilbara?
Yeah, well, it's got a long way to go, but people are already seeing it as a second Pilbara, and we know that, if I can just read this little quote, Australia's economy rides on the red rocks of the Pilbara. It has immensely contributed to economic wealth in Western Australia, particularly where the Pilbara is. And now they're saying that, looking at the area of Cameroon, Republic of Congo and Gabon, they're starting to say that this looks very much like a second Pilbara. In fact, the one quote is, "The Congo Craton is the new Pilbara of Africa." And they need someone to champion it, a lot of people believe. And in Western Australia, Andrew Forrest's name, has come up, the man from Fortescue, son of a missionary, who actually did a lot in the iron ore space there to overtake our Kumba iron ore into iron ore production and then export. They're saying the region needs a champion, and the word Glencore is popping up as a possibility. This is speculation at this stage by two analysts, Hunter Hillcoat and Mark Elliott of Investec Securities. But they're sort of scenario sketching and saying, look, this is the situation. The place is really bereft of infrastructure. Should we do it, and should it come to pass, it might be better to do this in a different way than Pilbara. The way not to do it is the way that BHP Billiton and Rio Tinto did it in Australia, rather wasteful. And a lot of people are saying, we're sitting between courses of the super cycle. The hors d'oeuvres have been eaten in the first part of the super cycle, and they're waiting for the main meal to come later, and they're speculating that the main meal should be different. There should be greater efficiencies, there should be lower prices, to make sure that China and the other countries buying this also get a share of the spoils, and it doesn't affect the economy unnecessarily. So hopefully there'll be some collaboration.
Now, on that note, it's said that a consolidation of the companies to mine Africa is preferable. What do you mean by that?
Even the juniors, and unfortunately there are a lot of juniors there and not big majors at this stage, but that generally is the case, at the starting points. And the juniors, namely the fellow from Equatorial Resources, John Welbon, he's saying that let's consolidate, let's break the farm fences, as we used to say here, make sure we get the most out of this region, make sure we share the infrastructure and do it efficiently from the start, so that all boats can be floated in this region, that the governments can benefit. And there's a lot of cross-border activity, so it's going to take a champion to put this all together, and that the companies need to come in, the end users, do it in a different way, in a 21st century way, to get the best out of it.
Now, sometimes working in Africa has its various challenges. What are some of the challenges they expect to face, and how will they overcome them?
Yeah, well, it seems to not have the infrastructure, which is understandable. It needs port infrastructure, it needs rail infrastructure, so it needs water and all the other things. We do have a South African participant in there. Exoro Resources has got an exploration play in the Republic of Congo, iron ore prospect. But the names that are cropping up are, again, Glencore, which is headed, the CEO, Ivan Glazenberg, is from these parts, He's a Johannesburg boy. He's still remembered a lot in the corridors of mining in this region. And there's a close association between Glencore and Xstrata, which has also got a joint venture up there at the moment through Sphere. And, Xstrata is headed by CEO Mick Davis from these parts. We know him, former CFO of Eskom, created the Billiton, BHP Billiton, and then has done 28, 29, 30 acquisitions to create Xstrata as we know it. The idea is that perhaps someone like that, a major, can come in and start doing work that will mean that when demand grows again for iron ore, you know, the new entity or entities might be able to give the existing stalwarts like BHP Billiton, Rio Tinto and Vale of Brazil a run for their money, so that there's an extra competitor, that Africa benefits. Africa is seen as a very good prospect in many eyes at the moment. Perhaps some people are overstating it, but the truth is a lot of people are looking to Africa for future global growth, and a lot of them are seeing it in the resources sector, particularly mining. So it is mineral rich, but mining poor at the moment. And of course, you know, all the state-centric policies of the 70s damaged Africa. You know, people are crying out and saying, look, don't have, you know, negative policies again. Have balanced policies. You know, get your benefit out of mining, get your rents, but make sure you don't do it excessively to frighten everybody away. And this could be then a pool of iron ore potential. And then we've got the coking coal, you know, in southern Africa as well, which goes with that iron ore. We could have, you know, a Bowen Basin in southern Africa, and we're referring now to the Bowen Basin in Queensland in Australia, which has, you know, made a fortune of money for that province. And then on the other side, we're referring to an African Pilbara, and we know Pilbara has made a fortune of money for Australia. Perhaps it's Africa's time to get in on the act. And there is a lot of Australian involvement as well. But again, you know, in that junior space, people are saying, what about the majors coming through? And unfortunately, you know, in the old days, we used to have Anglo-American that did these jobs. For some reason, they haven't really got a strong enough foothold. And we know that they were in Zambia. You know, when Zambia nationalized in the 1969, it was a blow to Anglo, and then they withdrew from that territory. Zambia has lost a fortune through that nationalization. You know, they estimate something like 400 billion rand lost opportunity, 400 billion rand lost opportunity, you know, that they could have got. And now we see Anglo putting its toe back in there, which is so regrettable, because if there hadn't been a break in this whole African scene, perhaps the South African companies could be playing a much better role. In the meantime, global companies led by South African-born people are starting to play a role.
And these countries are ideally situated because they've got a port nearby, or they've got the sea nearby, and they just need to really get the infrastructure.
Yes, and people are getting innovative. You know, they're thinking of much faster, more efficient ports. I mean, you've got all the modern technologies that you can bring into being to make sure that things really work well. And along with these saying that, you know, along with people saying, look, it mustn't be too state-centric because that is market unfriendly, and they want to balance. Many of them are also saying, look, there has to be mining with a difference here. You know, people have to make sure that the government get the proper rents from the minerals, so that they can then spend that money on training people, so that there can be a diversification of the economy, so that they don't just depend on that mining. And in having that diversification, you know, you beat the Dutch disease. Otherwise, your currency gets too strong and you can't have tourists because you're too expensive. And so the mitigation factor could be the fact that they diversify and they create something special in Africa like we haven't seen anywhere else in the world, because they've had all the experience. They know that you can't be greedy, you've got to share, and that the governments also have got to play their role, making sure the policy is correct and that they spend the money correctly. And then we could have a very prosperous continent, you know, going forward.
Well, thank you very much, Martin.
It's a great pleasure, Shannon.
That's the show for today. Join us again next time for more news and insight into what's happening in the mining world.